Welcome to the Outthinker Blogcast. This is a blogcast dedicated to helping you outthink your competition. My name is Kaihan Krippendorff. This week I'm reporting from outside of Boston. I've been doing a workshop at the Endicott Center, which is a executive education center run by MIT. As you can see, it's a very beautiful, scenic, relaxing space. I just finished delivering a workshop for about 60 mid-market CEOs. I have been thinking this week about the cloud because Apple, as you know, has launched its iCloud. I've been reporting on the cloud, companies that have for 10, even 20 years been developing and working in this concept of software as a service. And of course, I do a lot of work with Microsoft, and Microsoft's been looking at the cloud seriously for the last couple of years, and last year launched a big marketing initiative around the cloud. But this is the first chance that we are getting to hear how Apple describes a concept, the cloud, that others have tried to describe, and I would say that others have tried to describe it ineffectively. And it's important because I think that this gives us insight into Apple's core competitive advantage, which is an ability to create a concept, to create a category in the mind of the market more effectively than competitors. You know, iPad is a new category. It's not a tablet PC. The iPod was not an MP3 player. Apple is able to create new markets by creating new market space and new concepts. And so now that they're focusing their brilliance, if you will, on the cloud, we can learn something about how they do that. Now, what I did last night, I flew from San Diego to Boston, and I stayed up much later than I probably should have, watching videos of Steve Jobs and Steve Balmer, each describing the cloud. And if you do that, if you contrast the language they use, you see three stark differences. The first is present versus future. Steve Jobs talks about the present. Steve Ballmer talks about the future. Steve Jobs talks about an issue where you're taking pictures. Maybe even yesterday you took a picture and then you have to go home in order to connect it to your computer and load it onto your iPhoto. iPhoto account. What he says now with the cloud is you'll take a picture on your camera, and it will immediately get sent to the cloud, and the cloud will send it back down to your computer. So by the time you get home, your photos are already waiting for you on your computer. This is a problem that you're facing today, that you faced yesterday, that you faced last month. He's talking about today. Steve Jobs, by contrast, talks about the future. His speech opens up with the story of a future hypothetical situation in which two children, one in Thailand, one in the United States, are talking, and they're talking somehow over the internet, and the Thai child is speaking Thai, and the US child is speaking English, but they're able to communicate. He describes a future that hasn't happened yet. Steve Jobs describes a present that's already happened. So that's one distinction. The second one is pain and opportunity. Steve Jobs talks about pain. Steve Ballmer talks about opportunity. Steve Jobs talks about that Apple's initial insight was that the Mac would become the digital hub of the home, and that the system is broken down, is the language that he uses. And he says, why? Because devices have changed, and now every device takes photos. Every device has music. And so syncing all of these together becomes untenable. He describes pain. Steve Jobs talks about opportunity. He talks about creating the future. He talks about all of this will be inevitable. He talks about being excited about what's possible. He talks about possibilities and opportunities, while Steve Jobs talks about pain. And the third is there's a certain spatial consistency between the language of Steve Jobs and it's absent in the language of Steve Ballmer. I think this is maybe the most important point. See, Steve Jobs talks about demoting the PC and Mac to be devices. Demoting means pushing down. Right? He talks about sending up photos and calendar items to the cloud. He talks about the cloud pushing down that music or those photos or those calendar items down. So there's a spatial coherence where devices are below, the cloud is above, and things move up and down. And that is a concept that people are easy to grasp, easy for people to grasp. Now, Balmer, if you look at the key words that he uses, he used words like deploy, distribute. He talks about platforms. He talks about tools. He talks about the cloud wanting devices and creating devices the cloud wants. He even creates agency for the cloud. So there lacks a kind of metaphorical coherence between Steve Ballmer's description of the cloud. Now, all of this may just seem minor to you, but I warn you that we really should pay attention, because Apple is very good at creating new concepts in the market, and I believe that is one of their core fundamental advantages. And if you learn to speak the way they speak and adopt the communication tools that they use to open up the market, then you can stay ahead of others in describing and competing in the cloud. So focus on the present rather than the future, focus on pain rather than opportunity, and make sure that there's a spatial coherence, up-down coherence, as you describe the cloud.